One thing my students tell me all the time before the B2 exams is, no matter how much grammar I study, every time I finish my exams, I go home and I think I didn't use any advanced grammatical structures at all. They answer the questions, they do the task, they keep on talking, but when the exam finishes, they think, why did I only use basic English? If that sounds familiar, this video is for you. Because today I'm going to share with you 6 grammatical structures that you can use and use again no matter what topic you get in your exam. Hello, my name is Monica and I'm an EOI English teacher in the south of Spain. And today's video is all about what happens in exams because you're not able to show all your grammar, all your level. And the problem is not your grammar, your vocabulary, or that you didn't study enough. The problem is that in a stressful situation such as an exam, you tend to go to safe sentences. You don't want to leave your comfort zone. So you say things like, I think, people should, it's important because blah blah blah, and you forget all the grammar that you spent months studying. So in this video I will show you 6 structures that you can use naturally in monologues, writing essays, dialogues, with real examples linked to the most common B2 topics. Are you ready? Let's begin. Let's start with one structure that students often confuse, and this is used to, be used to, and get used to. The good thing about these 3 grammatical structures is that they help you talk about changes, habits, and adaptation over time. So they are perfect for topics such as social media, technology, or even lifestyle. Now let's remember the quick rule. We use used to followed by infinitive, and then be used to and get used to is followed either by a noun or an ing form. The first one is used to talk about things that you did in the past but you no longer do. And when we use to be used to, we are talking about things that we are accustomed to. The structure get used to is when we want to talk about adapting to something. Just say that you get the monologue about social media, which is super popular and common in B2. You might say something like, in the past, people used to communicate face to face, but nowadays, teenagers are used to interacting through social media. As a result, our society is gradually getting used to a more digital way of socializing. Look at that. You have just one sentence, but 3 fantastic grammatical structures. Next, we're going to see a structure that is going to help you immediately sound more professional and more formal. So instead of saying, I think climate change is worrying, you can use impersonal passives to express that idea. So instead of saying, I think or I believe, you take the impersonal passive and you say, it is believed, it is said, it is considered. By using the impersonal passive, you are showing your opinion in a much more or less personal way and much more professional, formal way. So remember that the impersonal passive is formed by the verb to be and the past participle. For example, it is said, it is thought, it is believed. Or if you want to sound even more advanced, you can even use a subject and then the passive. For instance, X is thought to be Y, or even X is believed to have plus the participle. For example, climate change is thought to have contributed to more frequent droughts and heat waves. The next structure that we're going to see is perfect because in any dialogue you normally have to negotiate with your classmate something. You have to decide on something together. Sometimes you have to plan a party, or you have to decide on traveling somewhere, and you have to express your opinion and talk about your preferences to convince each other. So this structure is would rather. Now, would rather is the perfect substitute or replacement for the typical I prefer. Now, please, let's run away from I prefer, because you cannot imagine how many times we repeat I prefer, especially in our dialogues. So let's remember the structure. Would rather is always followed by infinitive. So for example, would rather go. Or if you want someone else, so if you want to say in Spanish, yo preferiría que tú, o preferiría que nosotros hiciéramos X, is formed by would rather, the person, and past simple. So let's imagine that the dialogue that you have to do with your classmate is about deciding to do a course together or joining a club. You might say something like, I would rather join a cooking course because it's so much useful in everyday life, instead of saying, I prefer a cooking course. Or a little bit more advanced, you could say, I would rather we chose the cooking course because it seems more practical. So remember, would rather is perfect for dialogues when you have to reach an agreement. Now, the next structure is super simple, but very, very effective. And the structure is the plus comparative. I am sure you have heard it before. The more, the better. The bigger, the worse. So the structure is quite simple. We use the plus a comparative on the first part, and then the plus another comparative on the second part. For instance, if you are talking about health in your monologue or in your writings, you might say, well, the more regularly people exercise, the healthier and more energetic they tend to feel. Or you can even involve the government, which is very useful in your monologues or writings. You could say, the more governments invest in promoting physical activity, the lower obesity rates become. So now it's time for a grammatical structure that is going to help you avoid being repetitive. Imagine the topic is work and study, okay? You might say things like, well, working and studying at the same time is difficult because blah, 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 blah. I want you to think that any topic that you get, I am sure there are two parts or two sides of the story, one good and one bad. So try to find a contrast, because the next grammatical structure are contrast clauses. Now, these clauses are used to express opposition or opposite views of the same idea. So these words or phrases are despite, in spite of, although, even though, though. And let's remember the grammatical rules. So when we use despite or in spite of, it's always followed by a noun or ing. Okay? Careful here, because a very common typical mistake is that we use despite or in spite of plus a full sentence, and that's not the case. So for example, you can say, despite the financial benefits of having a part-time job, many students struggle to balance work and academic responsibilities. As you can see, despite is followed by a noun, which is financial benefits. Now, a different contrast connector could be although or even though. Let's see an example. Even though working while studying can be very, very stressful, it may help young people become more independent. So this structure is excellent if you want to complicate things a little bit. What we tend to do, because we want to feel safe, is, okay, this has many benefits, but there are also disadvantages. Now, as you can see, because they are opposing views, you can use a contrast connector. For example, although there are many benefits, there are also difficulties. Or despite the benefits, there are also difficulties. So take any idea. If there are two sides or positive and negatives, transform it using a contrast connector. And similar to contrast connectors or contrast clauses, we have the purpose clauses. So clauses that we use to explain why we do something. Now, the most basic connector or word that we use to explain why we do something is to. For instance, why do you go to school? I go to school to learn English or to improve my English. Why do you go to the gym? To get fit. Okay? Now we have three other alternatives that are a little bit more advanced and will definitely help your English. These connectors are so that, so as, and in order to. Now, I am sure that you have used in order to much more, and it's always followed by infinitive. The same thing happens with so as, okay? We use so as to plus infinitive, and it means exactly the same as to or in order to. In Spanish, para. And the last para, okay, the last connector or the last phrase to express purpose is so that. But this is different because so that is followed by a modal verb. So let's say that you also have a monologue about work. You might say, many students take part-time jobs so that they can afford their university expenses. So as you can see, so that is followed by a modal verb in order to be correct, and it means para. An example with so as to would be some young people work while studying so as to improve their future career prospects. The next structure is the one that if you don't have enough time to study the rest, I would suggest studying this one. And these are conditionals. Why I really love conditionals is because they are totally versatile. You can use them in any situation and with any topic. They will fit in perfectly. So I am sure you already know by now the structure of conditionals. So we have 0, 1, 2, and 3 types. So for instance, if the topic is environment, you could use a first conditional by saying, if governments invest more in renewable energy, pollution levels will decrease. Now let's see a second conditional for the same topic. If people reduce their carbon footprint, environmental problems would become less severe. An example of the third conditional would be, if stronger measures had been taken earlier, the effects of climate change would have been reduced. And if you are brave enough, you might even use a mixed conditional. If previous generations had relied more on renewable energy, we would face fewer environmental problems today. Before you leave, I want you to remember something. The goal isn't to memorize absolutely every single grammar structure in your textbook. And it's definitely not spending hours memorizing grammatical rules on paper, only to forget everything during the exam. The real goal is every time you walk into a B2 exam, you should already know two things. What grammar structures am I expected at this level? And how can I use them naturally if the topic gives me the chance? So instead of thinking the day of your exam, oh my God, I hope I remember some advanced structures, go into the exam thinking, okay, if the topic is the environment, I'm going to use conditionals. Or if the topic is social media and technology, I'm going to use to be used to. Or if I need to sound more formal or objective, I'm going to go for an impersonal passive. And the important thing is not really talking or answering the questions, it's about how can I use or put into practice these grammatical structures in any topic that I get. That's the solution. How I'm going to use the grammar that I know in these exams. If your B2 exam is in the next few weeks, come back to this video and revise these structures to be ready. In the description box below, I have left a little summary with all the rules and grammatical structures we have covered in this video. So please download it, it's free. And if you have a classmate who always says, oh my God, I know my grammar, but I never get the chance to use it in my exams, please share this video with them. I'm sure they'll thank you later. I hope this video was useful. Let me know how your exams go and see you next time. Bye!